The reason I'm excited to run an AI company is I think it's the most interesting technological force and disruption that we've seen in my lifetime. And in the AI space, the speed is blistering and it's like nothing everyone has ever seen, and it's going to get faster, not slower. Are you spending enough time scaling yourself as a leader? Are you spending enough time learning the craft of being a great CEO?
What's your top tools that you think you have added in the recent years that have boosted your productivity?
A CEO does three things: strategy and vision, make sure they got the right people on the bus, and make sure there's enough cash in the bank.
Today we're talking about what changes when the founder founds their fourth company and to what degree the AI changes the landscape. I'm Arty McLabin, founder of GameReady and Borzai, and today joining me is Matt Blumberg, CEO and founder of Markup AI, as well as three other companies, including Bolster and Return Path, which he has founded and managed for 20 years and brought to 500 employees, as well as revenue of $100 million. Matt, that's a pleasure having you here. Hello.
It's great to see you, Arty. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll start from the first question, and this is actually, Matt, so you have so much experience, and I would just so much love to hear how your day looks today as an experienced CEO when all this technology changes have happened over the past few years. I'm just so curious because, it's not traditional so much now, because so much stuff's changed. How your day looks?
Yeah, the thing with running startups and growth stage companies is there is no such thing as typical. To some extent, my days look the way they've always looked. There's a mix of internal things and external things. There's a mix of management and leadership and me being an individual contributor and doing work. There's a mix of strategic and tactical. I think I always come back when people say, like, what does a CEO do? I always come back to a blog post written by one of my friends and longtime board members and mentors, Fred Wilson, who just very simply said, like, a CEO does three things: strategy and vision, make sure they got the right people on the bus, and make sure there's enough cash in the bank. And, those things are top of mind. There's obviously a lot of other things I do as well. I think what's changed in the operating in the world of AI is this is far and away the most dynamic and fastest pace environment that I've operated in. And I've been running internet companies since the mid 90s. So it's not like I've been working in slow, sleepy industries. Just keeping up with not only the technology, but the landscape around us is something that is, if not new, at least emphasized in a different way than it has been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And do you in particular feel a bigger difference in, for example, fundraising? So how venture capitalists are interacting with you, perhaps? Because your new startup is based on AI. Could you tell us actually a few sentences about Markup AI before we continue this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Markup AI, which is the company I'm running, is we call ourselves Content Guardian Agents. And what that means, the way to think about what that means is that generative AI is, as we all know, is a tsunami, right? I mean, it's just washed over everything. And it has changed the way people think about lots of things. But in particular, in our context, it's changed the way companies think about creating content. So now they have far fewer people creating far more content than ever before. And that sort of generative AI tsunami actually creates a lot of enterprise risk. So what Markup AI does is tries to help companies reduce the enterprise risk around content. And we try to give companies the confidence to hit the publish button. So essentially, our guardian agents are AI that are purpose-built to oversee other AI. So we make sure through the use of our agents that companies are producing content that is on brand, that's compliant with laws and regulations, that's accurate, and that's optimized for the new world of of marketing, not the old world of marketing. So anyway, that's what we do, very simply. So we are building a business right in the middle of the generative AI ecosystem. We are ourselves building a native AI business using all of the tools and coding assistants and everything else that an AI startup would do. The one thing that's a little different about us that's interesting is this company is actually 25 years old, and we have a legacy business that is sort of what I would describe as old AI, so it's natural language processing, with lots of large enterprises that have been using us for years, decades even, to solve a related problem that we're now sort of pivoting and bringing them with us into this new agentic future. So, a lot of the things I do every day have to do with the transition and the transformation of our company, which is a little bit more of a one-time thing over the sort of the course of this year and into next year. But fundamentally, it feels half the time like I'm building a raw AI startup, which is very exciting. Half the time, like we're doing some business transformation, which is its own thing.
Great. So wait, so Markup AI is a spin-off from your previous companies?
No, it is a new name for a legacy business that I was hired in a little over a year ago to run. So it's not a business I've started. We have created and started a new platform that's called Markup AI. And that's a new name for the company, but the company's actually been around for about 20, 25 years, unrelated to the other businesses that I've run over the years.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So how is, if I get back to my previous question, do you feel any particular difference in, for example, fundraising and VCs when it comes to AI startups? Do you feel that it is now easier or harder to get a VC? Of course, for you, it's easier because you just have a portfolio which backs you up, obviously. But can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, it's a little interesting. I haven't raised money for this company other than from our existing shareholders. So I'm a little bit adjacent to the fundraising process, but I do see quite a bit of it because I spend some chunk of my time talking to other founders and entrepreneurs and mentoring them. And the funding environment is both frothy and cautious at the same time. So it's frothy in that there are a lot of exciting businesses being built, and the ones that really start to take off and get traction have no problem raising a huge amount of money at high valuations. But there's a lot of caution that a lot of the VCs I know, or the firms where I'm an LP, there's a lot of caution that they're feeling at the moment around how sustainable and defensible a lot of these new AI type companies are going to be. So I think it's it's very uneven. There's plenty of money out there for companies that are doing well and get traction. There is some skepticism. On the bright side, it is cheaper and easier than ever to get started with a company. So you don't need to raise as much money to get going and to demonstrate that traction.
I'm a witness of that because that's what I do. Okay, I have an AI startup which I started in parallel with my existing companies that I manage. So yeah. So a lot of those startups are actually vibe coded minimal products that people don't really want to use. So 95% or 99% of the vibe coded software right now is just software that is pretty much ought to lose before it's even launched, right? So this is not real startups. This is just MVPs that are so easy to produce, and now so many new founders appear suddenly because now it's just much easier to become a founder.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, look, 95, 99% of startups have always failed. So that's no different. But it is true, and it's an interesting observation that my CTO really I think articulated well recently, which is that vibe coding makes it easier than ever to write lines of code, but it doesn't necessarily produce software products, and it certainly doesn't build software companies. Right? Those two things are not just spitting out of cursor. So I think a lot of the things that are still required to be a successful software startup or just go beyond how quickly you can spit code out.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah. I mean, I even talk about it more as from a point of view of not speeding code, but speeding some functionality. Okay, so when you have some functionality and suddenly you can say, oh, I have a product, but this product is not yet even brought as a POC to any customer, right? So you just have working code, which is speeded out in a few weeks time, but it's people actually struggle now to bring customers because there's so much alternatives out there, and it's so much easier to build the software so that the customers actually have also more pool to choose from, so they end up just kind of skipping over the lower quality. So it raises the bar for all the startups. So pretty much we need to work harder and produce better software because our competitors also produce better software pretty much. Actually, about Markup AI, so what's your target audience? Is it enterprise or is it also SMBs?
Yeah, I mean, we are we are a lightweight solution that also is enterprise grade. So we have clients that are the largest companies on the planet, but we are also able to be used by an individual user or a really small marketing team at a smaller company, and we have pricing that scales up and down as well.
Makes sense. Thank you. I saw some news that you've built an AI fantasy board with Steve Jobs on it as part of the people. So who was it? It was Steve Jobs, it was Warren Buffett, and Oprah. Is it right?
I think there are 15 people on our fantasy board. Those are three of them, but there's some other interesting ones as well. And that's a great project. That's one of a couple agents that I've built for myself that I would sort of file as like CEO agents. And that one in particular, I actually borrowed the concept from a friend of mine, a guy named Mike Collins, who's the CEO of Alumni Ventures. And I sit on the board of Alumni Ventures. So I saw him doing that and asked him if he minded if I did the same. And he's actually written about it quite a bit as well. But it's a really interesting agent. Essentially what I did is I started with my executive team doing what we called the fantasy draft. So if you've ever played fantasy football or fantasy baseball or basketball or soccer, similar process. The executive team went through and said like, oh, we want to pick that person for our fantasy board and that person and that person. We divided up the draft into categories. Iconic business leaders, technology leaders, technology investors. We have a category called a different voice, which is why Oprah ended up on the board. And some sports people are also on the board. But essentially what we did with the agent is we built a really, really detailed profile of each of these board members, like 5 to 10,000 word profile, with a really specific formula to it, where we pulled in information using one of the deep research LLMs about how that person behaves as a board member. What is their public persona? What are things they've said on the record? What's sort of their body of thought and body of experience? Those are all part of the agent. And then there are some very specific instructions in the agent about how to adapt the persona of those people and how to respond to inputs and questions from me. So sometimes what we get is the consensus of the board, the fantasy board. Sometimes we get the sort of dissenting opinions or outlying opinions. But it works very, very well as, as a little bit of a thought partner for me to stress test.
I use this personally?
Sorry?
You use it personally? So you send the prompts to it, or is it your team?
No, I use it all the time. And I use it to really, kind of help me shape ideas and communication, either that are going to my real board or to my executive team.
That's super cool, Matt. Can I have you on my fantasy board?
I put myself on my own fantasy board mostly so that I could check as a check and make sure when it quotes me that it sounds reasonable. But Yeah, it's something that's easy to do that I think every CEO would benefit from. But it comes with pitfalls as well. So I get a lot of value out of it. I'm happy to talk about the value I get out of it. But like any AI piece of work, I like to say it's sort of garbage in, garbage out. So you have to recognize that it's a static group of profiles. They're not real humans. So it only knows what you tell it. If you don't give it last quarter's shitty results, they're not going to know that your strategy isn't working. They'll react to things, in a vacuum unless you provide a huge amount of context. They also, I realize I'm talking about them like they're people. They're not people. They're not in the room. They don't see a board meeting. They don't see they don't see you slumped over in your chair or with your arms crossed and defensive. So they don't function as a board, but it does function as a very helpful, like I said, sort of thought partner. They stress test ideas. They force me out of my own echo chamber. They challenge my assumptions. So I get a lot of value.
Because they're different than you, at least theoretically.
They're different from me, and they are iconic, and I know enough about most of the characters that we put on the board, so that I understand the context that they come at us from. So when fake Jack Welch tells me I'm not rigorous enough about the numbers, okay. When fake Steve Jobs kicks my ass because we're not focused enough on product design, okay, I get it. And so those things are helpful in and of themselves.
Nice. And what other tools are you using? So you're probably using so many of those. What's your, let's say, top tools that you think you have added in the recent years that have boosted your productivity the most, and probably save you so much time on manual stuff you've been doing all over the years before?
Yeah. There are a bunch of things. So I've built two principal agents. So one of them is Fantasy Board. I built another agent called MattBot. And MattBot is my personal writing assistant. So MattBot has been trained on everything I've ever written. I've written a lot. I've published 3 books. I've hosted 2 podcasts. I've written a bunch of ebooks. I've written a blog for 25 years. All those things have been loaded into MattBot. So it knows not just my writing style, but it knows a huge percentage of my lived experience as a professional. So MattBot is a hugely helpful writing partner for me. I don't outsource everything to it entirely. I put in, bullet points and prompts and questions, and then I shape the output of it. But it's a very helpful tool in terms of drafting content for me. So I use MattBot. I use the Fantasy Board. We built an internal architecture at our company on an open source platform called LibreChat. So that lets everybody in the company collaborate securely and sort of get the benefit of shared memory and shared MCP tool access and things. So that's sort of become a go-to for me for a lot of things internally. I'm a huge fan of Claude. I've used all the models. They're all good at some different things, but I've really gone deep on Claude. I have the Chrome extension running. I have Claude Cowork and Claude Desktop. I've started to use Claude Code quite a bit. Perplexity has become my search engine of choice. I think it's a specialist in that. It does that very well. So I have a whole new set of tools that that I use every day, and I use the Markup AI Guardian agents as well on external communications.
Great. Actually, our stack is quite similar because, for example, for me, my main operational agent is Claude Code. I actually instruct it to use Perplexity. So it opens up the browser and uses Perplexities to search instead of using its own search tools. Actually, wow, yeah, nice. I also have a bot for myself that is fed on my own context. In my case, I didn't write books, but I actually started using X, even though I haven't been using X over the years. I started doing X actually with the main reason not to get exposure, but to actually document my thoughts in a way that will be accessible for my own agents so that I can train my agents on kind of my ideologies. That's what I use X for. People think I do that for the public. I actually do it for myself. So it's just a public diary.
Look, I think most social media people do it for themselves. They can say they're doing it for the public, but there's whether it's a vanity element to it or, I used to say I blog both to share my ideas with the world, but also really to help me clarify my own thinking about subjects. So I think there's a huge amount of user-generated content and social media in the world that is selfish in a good way.
Matt, so okay, so that's agents. That's agents. Are there any software tools that replace processes in your company that used to, let's say, cost whole departments of people and now are just getting replaced by software so that people can, do some more macro stuff and more creative strategical work?
Yeah, I mean, look, we are taking full advantage of automation and AI wherever it exists. Obviously, the biggest impact at our company has been using the coding assistants in engineering. I think we use them as effectively as I've heard any company use them. We ourselves are a technology company, so we have our own tech stack for finance and ERP, our tech stack for for go to market. We've been very, I think, very effective at not allowing too much sprawl in those stacks and reducing, sort of the number of the number of independent point solutions that can exist in our stack. But I think we're pretty effective at using everything to the fullest to reduce workflow. I don't know that there's one thing that's popped up other than all the AI stuff, in the last year that's really been a game changer.
Other question I have is, I have so many questions, man. I could invite you for another episode, but you're so busy. So one more. So in your current company, so in Markup AI, what do you think is one big decision or strategy or methodology that you have adopted and you kind of, I wouldn't say regret, but you would wish you would adopt it for your previous companies, something that could save you a lot of headache, not even tools, not even technology, but more of philosophy that you have developed over the years?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the biggest thing that's different about this job than the other ones I've had is this is the first company I didn't start that I'm leading. So, I was hired in, and I was really hired in to lead a business transformation, which is another way of saying a turnaround. And when you're leading a business transformation or a turnaround, you don't have, you don't have the luxury of indecision. You have to be swift at gathering information, and coming to judgment and making decisions and moving forward. And you also have less of your own self wrapped into the business, right? It's not your company. The same way when you're the founder, it's your baby. So I think I've learned how to flex a number of muscles here that I haven't flexed at the other companies that I've run over the years, and so that's the answer to your question is like, I wish I had done more of that at the companies I had started myself, being able to get outside of the company and sort of look at things with a more critical eye and move more swiftly. So I think I operate a little bit differently now because I've been in a different environment. It's a very interesting learning. And I think, people who've been CEOs of multiple companies, you learn different things in different contexts along the way. And that's the different thing that I've learned here.
So you want to tell me that when you've had return path reaching $100 million revenue and 500 employees, you've been slow.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
There were absolutely no, look, I think I was faster at the end of it than I was at the beginning of it. That was a 20-year journey, right? I started that company when I was 29 and sold it when I was 49. So you learn a lot in those years. But I was certainly much slower at the beginning of Return Path, even at the end, at identifying underperformers, right? I used to feel like I could coach anyone. I could give anyone feedback and they would get great, great, great. But there are times where you just can't afford to do that, or there are times where that's not going to work. I think I've always had a high clock speed in terms of processing information, but that doesn't mean that I led the organization at the pace that it could have been led.
I see. So you say that some of the decisions you've been making there then were decisions which have been more or less smeared relative to how you do it now. So now you're just cutting it. So you're more focused on it and you just say, okay, we need this action for the results. So I'm doing this action. I'm cutting it right now.
More decisive, more focused. Look, I'm still a believer in gathering data and being thoughtful about decisions, but that doesn't mean that I do that at the same pace that I used to do it, if that makes sense.
Crazy, man. Why are you doing that though? So, I mean, you can afford yourself to be slow now, right? But you don't want to be slow.
Not if I want to be successful running an AI company.
Why is it important for you personally?
Why is what important?
Why is that important for you to run a successful AI company? So what is your goal with it?
Yeah, I mean, look, I want to be successful at anything I bother to put my time into. So the reason I'm excited to run an AI company is I think it's the most interesting, technological force and disruption that we've seen in my lifetime. I mean, it's hard to compare it to the internet, right? Because the internet was obviously transformational for society, but those two things and the microchip, which, that'll take you back, 60, 70 years. Those three things have changed everything about society, and AI is the thing that's doing it right now. So it's very exciting to be, to be able to, to lead and build an organization in the AI space at this stage of my career, which is at least mid to late stage at this point.
It's also the fastest force so far. It's the fastest disruptive.
It is the fastest force. Yes. No. The internet took a while to get going, and the microchip took a while to get going. It's a lot of capital intensive to build a foundry and produce the next generation of a chip. AI, the speed is blistering, and it's like nothing everyone has ever seen, and it's going to get faster, not slower.
Do you like it?
Oh, I'm having a blast.
Do you like the pace?
Yeah. Look, I love learning and growing as a professional. I've learned and grown more in the last 12 months than, any other year I can think of in my career.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I can even say about myself that I have been working / learning for 15 hours a day every day for the past 8 months or so. So pretty much every day, 7 days a week, 15 hours a day, almost perfectly. I just have a streak of working, learning, because the iteration speed is so fast and you get the feedback from your actions so fast that it's just kind of a gamification like, there's a gamification sense to that. You just feel that everything is kind of a game. You just play with startups now. If you compare it to how it has been, I know. So I started my company 8 years ago. Yeah, it's so much faster right now. So everything, even my company, which is not in the AI space, it takes us as a team maybe 1/5 of the time to get something going compared to how it was before. So it's not just AI startups. Everything's so fast, and suddenly, because you see the feedback so blazingly fast, you can just keep going and keep iterating and keep trying everything. That's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
For sure.
What do you think about the future of software as a service, Matt. So, for example, do you think that there will be even an option for entrepreneurs to start new software as a service companies in, let's say, 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Do you think there's a future for new companies there?
I do, yeah. I mean, look, I think as you and I are recording this, right, which is late March 2026, there's been a significant amount of press and sort of stock market reaction to the public companies all about SaaS over the last bunch of months that are saying, SaaS is dead, SaaS is in trouble. And I think the reality is that that's true. And I'm happy to talk about why. And that doesn't mean that we've seen the last new SaaS company. Innovation and in any sector can continue, even if a sector itself isn't growing explosively the way it used to grow. I think SaaS companies are going to be different in some respects in the future than they have been in the past. If you think about if you think about what a SaaS company really is, it tends to be complex workflow on top of a data store, right? If you just reduce it to its bare minimum, right? It's workflow on top of data. I think the way the world of technology is evolving, the complexity of the workflow may start to give way to agentic access to data. And that doesn't mean that SaaS doesn't exist anymore. It just means it's going to be different in the future. The SaaS companies that get that, and the software startups that get that, are the ones that are going to do well in the end. But they're not going to be able to be overbuilt, and the sector is not going to be able to be overbuilt. If you take a step back and look at SaaS in general, there are probably too many companies, right? Because it was a good business model and people like to fund it. There are an awful lot of tiny little point solutions out there that, maybe in a vacuum, you can ROI justify this one or that one, but most of them are really features. They're not companies. And, I think there's going to be a lot of rationalization of that in this period that we're in now. But I think that would have happened anyway. I don't think AI brought that about, any more than just the sort of evolution of the sector and the passage of time. And then AI is also going to impact the way software functions, not just the way it's built, but the way it functions in the future.
Yeah, well, so you say pretty much that besides AI unlocking the new possibilities, it also speeds up the development, but pretty much even if there would not be that explosion of AI, we would still kind of fill in the vacuum of missing software over time until we pretty much reach kind of a status quo where when everything is just already kind of automated, or there's already a solution for everything. So we will kind of reach that status quo even without AI, you say. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, look, every sector has its life cycle of expansion and consolidation, and SaaS has been around for a long time now. As I said, just because you can have a discrete point solution for something that you can ROI justify on its own doesn't mean that that's the best way to organize a function or a workflow overall inside your company. So I look at what we're doing as a company right now as a buyer and user of technology, for example, and we're going through a major overhaul of our go-to-market stack, and we are taking roughly 15 or 16 vendors down to 3. Some of that is that we had functionality we were paying for that we weren't using. Some of it is that there are companies that have consolidated pieces of functionality into a whole solution. Some of it is that we're probably able to, use AI and agents to do a couple of things on our own that we used to have a vendor do. But if you look at all of it, we're taking 16 vendors down to 3, and we're probably taking 70% of our cost out. So I'm always wary of thinking that whatever I do is what everyone else is doing, or whatever my company does is what everyone else is doing. But we can't be the only company in the world that's thinking that way.
Do you think, Matt, that those companies which you called features rather than companies, so there you say some of them are really features rather than companies, do you think that those have a place when we look at it from perspective of mergers and acquisitions? Because a feature can be acquired after all, so maybe they're not feasible or survivable as a company, but maybe they can build it for the purpose of being acquired. What do you think? Is it feasible to even aim in that direction?
Yeah, it is, absolutely, and there continues to be real real M&A markets. Surprisingly, more than I would have expected from data that I've seen now that's coming out about 2025. But that's what I mean about consolidation. So it's not just that these companies are going to go out of business. A number of them will be acquired and sort of folded into other solutions. But I think overall, when you see waves like that, uh, frequently, a large platform will pick up a point solution and they'll add it in, but that doesn't mean they're adding that much revenue in. The revenue per customer for that feature over time will not be the same as the revenue per customer for that product as a standalone company.
Right. So they'll probably purchase it for quite a low valuation.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's what we're seeing, at least at the public markets, that valuations in SaaS are coming down. That ripples through to the private market.
Yeah, but also the cost of the production of the SaaS is getting down. So pretty much it takes you less to build it. You also earn less. But do you think it's actually net more profitable or less profitable? As if you compare the value the SaaS developers get from actually producing the product, do you think that their net profit actually goes up or down right now? I mean, you know what? Now compared to, let's say, 5 years ago, I'm not speaking about what's going to be a year from now, just now compared to 5 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's probably a difference between new entrants and legacy companies. I don't know that it's cheaper to operate a legacy business than it used to be, but it's certainly cheaper to start a new one. Legacy businesses that are trying to retrofit themselves to be more AI oriented or more compact, it's just a harder task than starting from scratch. Right? There's always legacy. There are always layers. I always think of it as like layers of sediment that companies accumulate as they get older and older and older. And it's always hard to chip away at those. And it always has been. That's not something that's new to this moment either.
It's kind of even tempting sometimes to start cleaning up all the legacy mess when you can expand to new markets. So you need to choose either you're expanding to a new market, you're launching a new product based on your existing products and based on your existing logistics, or you're cleaning up your existing stuff. So it's always kind of a hassle to even decide on that, because it's either increasing the revenue or reducing the expenses. Is there maybe something from your experience that you could tell us about the prioritization of those? Do you see that it's typically, let's say, more profitable to expand or more profitable to reduce the waste?
I don't think there's a single answer to that. I think it's very situational. Different companies are going to have different answers. What I would say is that the in the era that we're living in, of more rapid engineering output, scalable engineering output, and more rapid code production, the cost of fixing technical debt is higher than ever, because the replacement cost of building something new is so much lower. So that's something that I think legacy platforms are going to have to start recognizing and dealing with, is that it may just be easier to start over than to fix something that's been around forever. the use of coding assistants is going to be much more impactful creating something new and then modifying something that it created than trying to go into something that's like old with a bunch of legacy stuff in it and and go in and diagnose and fix.
Yeah, kind of the data becomes the king because the data stays the same. You need to have your historical records, you need to have your CRM data, and it's just the interface changes around it. But in the end, the data is the actual gold of the company because that's how you make decisions after all.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, do you think that there is now a difference on how lean startups need to behave when they start up their stuff, right? So pretty much the strategy of bootstrapping, let's say, or the strategy of prioritizing POC, MVP, the scope of the MVP, do you think there's a significant change to that? Or do you think that let's say the methodology of lean startup still works as is?
I think it absolutely still works as is. I think what's changed is how quickly you can iterate. And what that means is that while the framework of the methodology holds, how you structure it and staff different pieces of it, those things may be different. But the notion of co-creating product with your customers is as strong as ever. The notion of testing and starting small and then expanding is as strong as ever. It's just easier and faster to do all that stuff.
Yeah, I know some entrepreneurs actually prefer to, a lot of them even prefer to get the landing page out and test the waters on virtual demand before there is even a product ready. So there's a landing page, there is, let's say, the pitch to the leads, there is, let's say, a marketing campaign and a button to pay, but there's no actual product, right? So now it's kind of becoming so easy to to start up a actual working product that maybe the leads are actually less willing to even try to buy products which don't have any trial or any value production for free for them to even test out. What do you think about this?
I'm not sure I entirely understand your question.
Mm-hmm. So let me rephrase. So pretty much, do you think that this is still a viable strategy to try to make fake landing pages to assess the demand?
Yeah, I think that's dry testing or whatever. I think that's a viable strategy. The reality is like building a prototype is easier than ever, but it's still not quite as easy as as just spinning up a landing page. But I think the distinction between those two things is shrinking, basically.
Matt, another question, please. So, how do you decide, or how do you know when it's the time to stop some activity? Where's the time to pivot, or where's the time to just drop something completely? So if, for example, there is some team of founders out there that are watching this video, and let's say that they have doubts about the validity of their product, and they just tried maybe a few pivots and they see that it just doesn't bring traction yet. How would you decide about when is it the time to stop? How many times would you pivot around until you decide that, okay, we're giving up because the time is limited and we better off start something new from scratch and try it in a different field, perhaps? Do you have any framework for that?
Yeah, I don't know that there's like a crisp answer to it. Look, part of what makes entrepreneurs successful is persistence and like not taking no for an answer if they have vision about something. At some point, if the market doesn't want something, the market doesn't want something. So my co-founder at Return Path, George, used to say that, when he was talking to a prospect or a customer, he was looking for what he called the lapel clutch, right? He wanted the client to like grab him by the lapels and shake him and say, yes, I want that. And I want that now. So there are a lot of different ways you can express that. But if you are not hearing that from your target market at all, and you're iterating and iterating and you're still not hearing it, at some point, yeah, you have to recognize like you are pushing a rock up a hill. And what you want is you want that market pull. You want the market to beg you to get the product out the door faster. So entrepreneurs can be stubborn and persistent, and they need to be, but they also need to recognize, when they're pushing that rock up the hill. And I don't know that there's a formula for it. So
No formula. Damn, man. And okay, so I have a few more. When it comes to fundraising, so how does the entrepreneur decide if it's the time to spend the efforts on actually bringing a fundraising, bringing in the funds, or keeping up the bootstrap? Because now it's so cheap to produce MVPs, right? It's just pretty much your time. So as long as you have the time, it means that you can keep bootstrapping, or you can spend that time to bring in investors, which you can then leverage to maybe increase the scale of your team, or to maybe free more time for your team because of whatever, they can quit their day jobs or whatever. So when do you think this is actually the time to start doing the fundraising? Because fundraising takes time unless you already have the connections.
No, it does take time. And look, there's as with all things, I don't know that there's a single answer to it. There's certainly and it depends on the type of business you're talking about as well. So there are businesses that just consume a lot of capital to get built, and you don't really have a choice. Like, you got to raise money when you got to raise money. If you're running a bootstrap business that has 3 employees and no one cares if they make a lot of money, that's a different setup. And there's maybe more of an answer to that question, but not every company is in that position. If you are in that position, then what you really have to think about is how much the lack of capital is constraining your growth, and whether you're in a market that demands fast growth and iteration. And if those two things are both true, then you don't have a choice. Then you have to go raise money. But if one of them isn't true, or if neither one of those is true, you don't necessarily have to. So when you have that market pull, right, customers pounding the table, they want your product, and you have to go hire people to fulfill it, and you don't have money, then you have a problem. If you're lovable and clients pound on the table and you don't actually have to hire a lot of people because I don't think they have a single salesperson, customers are just buying the product and upgrading and spending more and more and more without interacting with the go-to-market team, good on you. Then that's not your constraint, and maybe you don't have a constraint. So I think those two things together are the things to keep an eye on: is what's constraining your growth, and is there a market imperative for speed that you have to respond to?
Is there even such a thing as a company which is not limited by the time? Because we're all playing kind of, again, it's a time race, pretty much, because we all have competitors. We all have so high speed of iteration that is pretty much putting us at risk if we are slow. Because if we're slow, someone's gonna do it before us, someone's gonna do it better than us. We're just losing momentum pretty much. So it's either you're fast or you're just not doing that kind. That's startups, and that has always been startups. But now with AI, it just gets kind of boosted up even further. So is there even such a thing as a company which is not constrained by time?
There are lots of companies in the world not constrained by time. They may not be AI startup.
New ones. Startups.
Yeah, if you're talking about an AI-oriented startup, sure, everyone feels like they're in a foot race, for sure. But it's the two things that have to go together. Is there a constraint on your growth coming from a lack of capital, and do you have to move fast? And there are some native AI companies that are not finding a constraint due to a lack of capital. So even if the second thing is true, the first thing may not be true.
So is finding a constraint actually good news for a startup?
I don't know. You look at the Lovable guys, and I think they're happy without a lot of constraints because they're just growing so quickly. But people always tend to anchor on the exception and not the rule, and that's the exception. That's not the rule. Yes, there are a handful of native AI companies that have just exploded. Most of them are in and around the coding assistant space, but I don't think that's going to be true for everybody in the AI space for long.
Okay, man, you're answering so fast. You're so articulate. You're so I planned for us 9 questions. And in the experience of this channel, I have never reached even 70% completion. I reached the completion with you, and I had a few custom questions as well. You're so articulate. That's crazy.
Thank you. I think that it helps to have a good conversation partner.
Thank you so much. No, it also probably helps you to write a book for that, because how many books have you written? So that's Startup CEO, that's Startup CXO, that's what is the third book? Is about boards.
Startup boards, yeah.
Boards, yeah. And you also co-authored how many? 7, 8, 9 books?
No, it's those 3 are the main ones. If you see other titles on Amazon, they tend to be derivatives of those 3.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. That's actually a section of Startup CXO that we spun out into its own book. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, right. I actually wanted to buy the CXO yesterday. In Audible, I only listen to audiobooks, and I couldn't find one.
CXO, we didn't do Audible for CXO. It was too long.
Oh man,
CXO is a great book, and I did not write that. Not even close to by myself. I wrote that with a whole team of people because that's the book that's really about how a leadership team at a startup and growth stage company is composed, how it functions, how you manage it, how the different jobs relate to each other. So it's a really, really rich book for not just a CEO, but for a management team or anyone that's an aspiring leader in a startup can get a lot out of it. But it's a very long book. So the Audible team was not interested in turning it into an audiobook.
Okay, I guess I have to get the text one and use the text to speech. So I'll make an audiobook for myself, the pleasures of AI. Crazy. Okay, so I guess I can get the Startup CXO and actually take the context from it and make it into my fantasy board. How about that?
Okay, there you go.
Crazy. Reading your books, I actually finished your book Startup CEO yesterday, and I have one question about it. So, how do you think, how much would the 3rd edition of the book change if you would ever write it now after all this AI revolution? What a percentage of the book would have to have some adaptation, do you think? What a percentage?
That's a great question, Arty. I have not really thought about that, so I'm kind of answering on the fly. I'll describe, first of all, the difference between the 1st edition and the 2nd edition. The main difference is that I had sold the company. So I added a section about exits that wasn't in the 1st edition that I think made the book better. If I was doing a 3rd edition, which I am not, at least at the moment, doing a 3rd edition, there would certainly be a bunch of things that I'd have to go edit because they probably feel old and not contemporary, even if the topic is still right. There are probably some things I would add about using CEO's use of AI and where you draw the line between using technology and being a human, which I think are important topics for leaders everywhere to kind of think about. I don't know beyond that what would be different about it, but it would have to be different. The original book was written in 2012. The 2nd edition was written in 2020, and the world is a kind of different place here in 2026. So I am sure there'd be a pretty sizable edit required for that. So, which is part of the reason I'm not doing it.
Yeah, but majorly that's still super relevant to what we have now. So, many things are just where they're staying as is. There are just core principles, and you've shared so many core principles there. And actually, I think that the second edition, where you have added the thing about exit, I think it kind of made the book complete, because that's kind of the full journey from founding and to exiting, kind of the full experience of a startup CEO, pretty much.
Yeah, no, that's why I was excited to do the second edition after we sold the company that I was running at the time. I haven't had the spark yet to come up with the third edition, but maybe someday.
Nice. What percentage of your day, Matt, is spent talking to AI agents or co-piloting AI agents? Maybe doing your own work through AI agents.
I don't know. Not huge. I mean, look, biggest chunk of my day is talking to people. So, and that's no different. Like, you run a company, you have an organization of people that depend on you. You have a board, you have customers as stakeholders. So most CEOs, unless you're a technical founder and CEO and all you do is write code, most of your day you're in meetings and you're talking to someone about something, selling someone on something. So of my individual contributor work, which is always a big chunk of my day, more and more of that is AI enabled or AI oriented for sure. But you can't automate sitting in a meeting. You can't automate inspiring an employee. You can't automate giving someone a hug when one of their parents dies, or when they have to put their family dog to sleep or whatever. There are things that are fundamentally human about the job that AI does not change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are just tools that can pretty much kind of boost the post-mortem from the meeting, because you can kind of have the transcription of a meeting, for example, and have your AI agent perhaps take some actions based on the meeting summary, but the meeting is still there.
Absolutely. No, I mean, you can speed up your follow-up a little bit. You can speed up your learning, but you can't. It's hard to speed up the meeting itself. And you can't automate the human connection that you get from the meeting itself.
I actually have one. We in GameReady in my company, we have quite adapted the way we're doing meetings, because now we started transcribing the meeting. So now what we do is we stop having the sections of deciding on action items. And actually, throughout the meeting, because the action items are quite clear in the transcription, it means that the AI that writes the summary can actually write up the action items. It means that you don't actually have to spend time recapping what has been talked about. And this is quite a hard habit to get rid of, because it's just years of practicing the action items. And besides that, it's funny, but in the duration of the meeting, I can actually give notes, like tasks, to the AI agent that will be reading that transcription after the fact. So like, I'm defining the tasks, like, okay, so blah, 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 and the AI should do this and this and that. And we keep talking, so just defining tasks.
Yeah, no, it absolutely helps automate lots of tasks. What it doesn't automate is the actual meeting itself. So you run into some human limits at some point.
You're also an extrovert, so you love that. You love the human connection, after all.
Yeah, I do. And look, there are successful CEOs that are more introverted. They still spend time with people. They just don't like it as much.
I do. No, I do. I'm an introvert, and I like spending time with employees, sure. Wow, Matt, I will not take too much of your time, and this is super valuable so far. I enjoyed that. Matt, one last question is, could you give our viewers some philosophical thought so they can take away and spend some quality time with themselves?
Yeah, if I wanted to leave, look, your title is the RawCEO, right? So if I wanted to leave any founder listening to this with one thought, it's, are you spending enough time scaling yourself as a leader? Are you spending enough time learning the craft of being a great CEO? Are you investing enough in your own development? So I would leave everyone with that thought, those questions.
That's a crazy one. It's also crazy to hear it from you because you've pumped out so much content that can help CEOs to implement your thought. So you have your blog, startupceo.com. Is that the address?
Yep, that's right. And I go in and out of blogging in great volume. I actually am just about to start doing a ton of blogging about AI. But startupceo.com is my blog. There are links to all 3 books on that. And then the company is Markup AI. Either way, I'm easy to find.
Great. There will also be the links below for the viewers. I would like to thank you, the viewers, for this time. And also, guys, you should absolutely buy Matt's books. And he didn't ask me to promote it or something. They are just, well, at least Startup CEO is one of the hands down best books I've read about business, and I'm genuine about that. So Matt, thank you very much for the book. Thank you very much for the interview. And this has been a pleasure. Actually, even contacting with you and Andrea before us setting this meeting was a very good experience. So you walk the talk, and I love that. I respect that really. Thank you, Matt.
Well, thanks, Arty. It was a great conversation. I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you. Bye for viewers. You need a surgery, and you don't have the time to sell the real estate property. No problem. Take the loan.
In the stock market, I try to investing from there and a bit of crypto, but I understand it's not something stable.
A viewer that watches this and has 0 capital and 0 experience in real estate, what should be his next step?